First, let me get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on this bipartisan agreement in the Senate regarding Biden's infrastructure bill?
I mean, it sounds like you guys have really covered most of it. It's not a good deal, and it does follow this pattern in Biden's career where he kind of prizes getting a bipartisan deal on something, just for its own sake, to be able to say, look, the system works. Look, I reached across the aisle and I managed to get someone from the other party to sign on to this, instead of actually trying to pass something that is makes sense, is good policy, or is actually necessary. So I think we're seeing that. That's the classic kind of Bidenism in action here. There's been quite a bit of reporting over the last 2-3 months that basically, whereas say us three perhaps see the Democrats' best chances of maintaining the House and the Senate as kind of providing material benefits to people, making their lives better in really tangible, concrete ways, and basically getting people excited enough to go, oh, well, it was worth it, all that canvassing and all that door knocking, all that voting we did, all that line standing we did to get these people in power. Let's do it again. That's sort of the, let's say the left-wing progressive theory of change. Biden sees his theory of change, his theory of how he's going to keep majorities in the Senate and the House, as if he can show that the system works, that compromise is still possible, which frankly to me is completely diluted. But I guess that is he came up in a very different time. Though he has kind of shifted on certain things like budget deficits and that kind of thing, clearly his head is still kind of in that space in the 1970s and 1980s that he came up with. In terms of the actual details of the infrastructure bill, you guys really covered it pretty well. The asset recycling is terrible. It doesn't even make sense from a economic standpoint. The whole point of this bill is that it's going to pump spending into the economy, and it's going to get people jobs, it's going to get people money into their pockets, and then they'll spend that money on other parts of the economy. They'll be able to go to restaurants, go to movies, they'll be able to buy consumer products, all that stuff, and that's meant to drive the economy. Okay, great. But if you are privatizing public infrastructure and that results in toll roads, what you're getting instead is just a further system of rent seeking, where these companies just ramp up these tolls and other fees, other user fees. People, instead of spending their money on actual productive parts of the economy, they just spend it to put it into the pockets of finance and private companies, which of course then recycle that money into, for example, buying up foreclosed houses so they can become the biggest landlords in the country, and a whole host of other things. Taking it away from the actual productive part of the economy and putting it into this kind of this rent-seeking finance bubble, basically. The exact opposite of what this entire thing is meant to do, the entire point of these big trillion-dollar, multiples of trillion-dollar stimuluses. And the other aspect, I apologies, I only signed on towards the end of the segment, so I don't know if you cover this. But the other part of this is that in the deal, they've talked about, it's only about, I think, $579 billion of new spending. The rest of it is they're going to recycle it through finding other ways. So they're going to try and claw it back through the IRS, or they're going to so that they've calculated this kind of magical economic growth that's going to happen, and so that'll pay for it. That's their calculation. And one of the other big ones is that they're going to draw on unused unemployment insurance. And so 26 states, I believe, cut off the expanded unemployment insurance early because there was that fear mongering around is the fact that people are getting paid a minimal amount finally to actually make to have a life. Is that stopping them from taking these low wage jobs without benefits and that are incredibly dangerous? Clearly, yeah, that must be it. So we're going to cut that. And so what they're going to do, what they're talking about doing, is repurposing that money and then using that to pay for some of this. Partly a stealth privatization scheme, which is, that's an injustice on a whole other level. There was actually a report just by Bloomberg the other day where they found that at least 9 million people never actually got any unemployment insurance over the course of this, because of a variety of things, because the system for delivering it is antiquated and Byzantine, because there's all these various rules in states that basically make it, depending on where you live, very, very difficult to get it. And they've talked about in this deal, spending or paying for some of the spending by going to look at the integrity of the unemployment insurance system. They talk about there's fraud going on. And so they're going to, we'll have to see what the details are, but they're going to, I guess, go after fraud. Now, okay, sure, you can say fraud is bad, but the reality is that you look at some real examples. When governments go after fraud in whether it's unemployment or other welfare systems, it's not necessarily that they're actually going after fraud. They could be going after people who have screwed up something when they were writing their forms to apply for things. They could be going after people who, made some other mistake or accidentally, misrepresented something about their biography. Who knows? It can be many things. There was actually I can't remember which state it was. Might have been Michigan, but they found that going after welfare fraud, they basically, I think 70% of the people they went after were not fraudsters at all. It was completely just a mistaken identity. So that's on top of everything that you guys have already covered. This is an added layer of injustice that again is not only completely contrary to all this stuff we hear about. This is the return of the federal government in people's lives, making a positive difference, that Biden is the new FDR / LBJ / Abraham Lincoln, all that stuff. It's contrary to that, but it's also economically, it completely defeats the whole purpose of this whole thing, which is to do a massive stimulus, do short-term, big amount of spending, forget about the deficit for the short term, and hope that will bring back the economy in a big way. And all of that, I mean, if people aren't getting their unemployment, if actually unemployment is being taken out, and as well as that, people are having to pay all these user fees, again, it's just more money going into finance into completely unproductive parts of the economy that are then recycled into basically dominating people's lives even more than they already do.
Yeah. I find the argument that Trump did way better than expected in the November election due to his passage of the CARES Act and this, the checks in people's pockets, with his name on it, and the expanded unemployment insurance, which was kind of historic, at least in recent history at the time, pretty persuasive. And it seemed like that maybe the Democrats could learn a thing or two of that, just on a purely self-interested, I want to remain in power type of thing. Like, if we do this, like, people will like us and vote for us. But they're so captured ideologically and by interest that they I don't know if they understand that or not. I mean, I can never really tell. But I wanted to ask you, because when you wrote your book, it was not a given, or it was not even likely, it didn't seem, that Biden was going to win the presidency, the Democratic primary, let alone the presidency. I remember thinking, like, man, poor Branko, like worked on this book, like worked on a whole book about like some guy who's going to come, he was going to come in like 8th in the Democratic primary, like after Iowa and New Hampshire, where he was just like absolute disaster. I was like, man, he's toast. I mean, maybe it won't be Bernie, but it's not going to be Biden. But then Biden won. Like, were you? I've always wanted to ask you, like, were you nervous, or like were you just like always confident? No, he's gonna pull it out.
No, I was not confident at all. I mean, I was sitting there going, what am I really doing this for? Like, is this going to sell anything? Because by the time this comes out, he might not even be alive from some of the kind of stuff we saw on the campaign trails, bleeding and everything. So there were many points where I was like, am I just completely wasting my time? I mean, in many ways, though, I was okay with that outcome of Biden just losing and being forgotten in history, because I had studied his career for the book, and I was like, well, this is not a guy that you want taking power at this particular time. And so I was actually quite happy. One of the funniest things is that the book, I mean, it's dark, but it officially launched the day before South Carolina.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
I don't know if my book creates some sort of malign energy.
I blame
in
you.
the world. Yeah, I mean, clearly. Yeah, and then he came roaring back, and it was, people said things to me like that. They were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That this guy that you wrote this book about is, he seems to just be a non-entity now, and kind of a joke." And I was like, "Are you kidding? No, I don't care. I mean, that's fine. I wrote
So
the book."
your political commitments are stronger than your like self-interest in selling as many books as possible.
Yeah, I would say
Okay,
so.
well
I
that's
mean,
good.
it's
Because
like,
mine are not. I would be like, come on, Biden, baby. Come on, baby.
my thing was, I want the book to break even, because I don't want anyone who invested money into it to help me, write it. I don't want them to be screwed over, and it did that. And so when that happened, I was like, oh great, okay, now I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I mean, what happened, and it's interesting. We were talking about how for a while it seemed like maybe things were going to go in a different direction. And it was for that first, I guess, whatever month or two, when they were trying to pass a stimulus, and they ended up passing it on that party line vote via reconciliation, even though obviously there's massive flaws with that bill and it's very limited. It's just basically a temporary emergency bill that the biggest things about it kind of expire after a couple of years. Nonetheless, it seemed like, maybe this guy in this party has kind of turned over a new leaf and learned something. Maybe they are going to do things in a different direction. And I think what's happened since then, I mean, I think with the Democrats, centrist Democrats like Chuck Schumer, I think they still are kind of there. I think they realize, they understand that the kind of case that people like us have been making for a while, which is that if you don't deliver for people, you're going to get punished electorally. And that's why they passed that stimulus bill. I think Biden, on the other hand, I think he passed that stimulus bill. I think the job numbers for the first couple months that came out were quite underwhelming. The Republican Party started attacking the extended unemployment insurance, saying that basically it was keeping people out of work. And there's a variety of reasons why those job numbers were not good. If anything, to be honest, it's probably because they didn't go far enough. I mean, people are still paying off a ton of debt. So I mean, if you're paying off all this debt, medical or student loans or whatever, and you're not, again, spending it into actual productive parts of the economy, it's not really going to be that you're not going to get this massive comeback that you're hoping for. But anyway, I think when that happened, I mean, one of the things I found when researching Biden's career is that when he's attacked by the right, he runs away. He's not someone who is confident in defending, progressive or even liberal positions. He's a little more so now. He's done some things, obviously, with the Amazon union vote that other presidents didn't. So he's, for Biden, I mean, right now, this is maybe the most progressive you're going to get out of him. But I mean, for what we actually need, I mean, climate change. I mean, this bill is meant to be maybe the last chance to do anything for years, maybe even the rest of the decade on climate change. And that's all been negotiated out. But I mean, I do want to say, I don't know if we're going to move on yet, but I think we should also talk about some of the responses to this infrastructure deal, because there is a reason to be a little more optimistic, and with progressive Democrats kind of putting their foot down on certain things. So it's not clear that this bipartisan deal is actually going to be the thing that passes. And we can talk about that a little more. I don't know where you guys want to go.
Yeah, actually, I would like to discuss that. I didn't want my segment to go too long, so this is perfect. So, we've heard from some of the progressive Democrats in the House, people like Representative Jamal Bowman, that progressives are ready to withhold their vote as a bloc if they don't get exactly what they want in the, infrastructure bill. Bernie Sanders also says that he wants to ensure that there's like I forget the wording he used, but he seems to buy into this notion that there can be a separate bill that has everything that we actually want in it that can pass through reconciliation. I'm actually super skeptical of that, but progressives banding together and withholding their vote, I think could be a productive strategy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so right now, because everything is so narrow in both the Senate and the House, it does offer some opportunities for basically progressives to leverage whatever votes they have to be able to get their way. And so, with this bipartisan deal, Biden is kind of having to negotiate several different interests and sides. He wants to get a bipartisan deal. He doesn't care what's in it, as long as it's bipartisan. He can say, look, I managed to get people to agree. The system works, yada, yada, yada. That's what he wants. The Republicans don't want big infrastructure spending. They don't want any big spending. They don't want the economy to get better, because they would like to get as much gains as possible in the midterms. So they want to keep it as small and limited as possible. You've got centrist Democrats who are sort of, whether it's ideological or just sort of political strategy, doesn't really matter, but they are kind of trying to, people like Sinema and Manchin are trying to kind of appear centrist. And then you've got progressive Democrats who want some really clear and key priorities in this bill, climate probably being the number one, but also things like childcare and universities and all that kind of thing. And so to get this bipartisan deal passed, Biden, on the one hand, has to appease the centrists and the Republicans, which he's doing with this bipartisan deal. But on the other hand, he also has to have every single progressive Democrat on board as well, effectively. And so what he has had to do, because progressives have said, we are not going to vote for this unless we get a vote first to advance the reconciliation package, which is meant to be the actual infrastructure package. And so Biden has had to publicly say, I'm not going to sign this bipartisan deal on its own. It's a no-go unless it is also done in tandem with reconciliation. And whether he really means that or not, who the hell knows? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But you can't, the other thing, if you look through Biden's career, you can't really trust a lot of things he says in public. But what that has done is now all these Republicans who had signed on to the deal and who were hoping that, this was the way that they were going to use Biden's instinct for bipartisan deal making and compromise with the right to basically narrow his agenda. Now they're looking at, the way that progressives are pushing the reconciliation package, and they're going, well, hold on. Well, we're not going to, if they're going to pass all this stuff that we didn't want anyway, then why are we going to sign on to this deal that then also lets Biden kind of do a big event or a press conference where he announces, look at me, I managed to get a deal. I'm a really great president. We don't want to give him that win. And so now all these Republicans are starting to kind of mutiny and are saying, no, we're not going to support this infrastructure deal. So, the bipartisan deal may not even end up happening. And what could happen entirely by accident or by a series of sort of various events, not planned, is that by doing this, the Republicans abandoned the deal, which effectively looks really bad for them. They negotiated this deal, then they abandoned it. And then the reconciliation package ends up going, and the bipartisan deal doesn't happen because of Republican intransigence, which would be interesting because that sort of, to some extent, happened when Biden was vice president. Obama would task him to negotiate with Republicans, Tea Party Republicans, for how to cut the deficit. And according to Bob Woodward's book, which Woodward tends to exaggerate and stuff, but the kind of thrust of his argument in the book is that Biden basically just gave Republicans whatever they wanted because he just wanted to get a deal. So he would offer trillions in cuts and all this stuff that progressive Democrats that were in the bargaining table kind of were like, my God, what is he doing? And the only reason that didn't happen is because of the intransigence of Tea Party Republicans who said, yeah, we love these cuts, but what about this revenue raising? No, we don't want to have any taxes. And then they torpedoed the thing. So we could be seeing a version 2.0 of that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It could be a lot worse than that. And actually this deal goes through and nothing happens in reconciliation. I hope not. But yeah, right now I think there's reason to think that it's not quite settled, and there is a more optimistic future possible. Although that still leaves us with a far smaller infrastructure package. Even the reconciliation one is not big enough for what the climate emergency demands. So yeah.
Can I just say real quick, your book was just very useful for me to, I guess, predict things, right? Because you kind of have to look at who Biden is as a person, what motivated him throughout his political career. And so, like, it was hard, especially in the beginning of his administration, to not fall like victim to like some of the positive stuff that was going on. And he did present himself as someone who was against the fear mongering about the deficit, right? And then now with the infrastructure bill, all of a sudden he's back to, oh, we got to have pay fors. We got to have pay fors. He doesn't say he's worried about the deficit, but he's acting as if he is. And that's the important part of it. But Nando, why don't we switch gears to other Biden-related issues?
Well, I want to ask you about his foreign policy, which is, as far as I can tell, is very similar to Trump's and immigration. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't let producer Kale play this video and see what we all react to it. Let's see, producer, go ahead.
For people, there's a reason why it's been harder to get African Americans initially to get vaccinated, because they used to being experimented on. The Tuskegee Airmen and others. People have memories. People have long memories. It's awful hard as well to get Latinx vaccinated as well. Why? They're worried that they'll be vaccinated and deported. So look, from day one, something that Governor Cooper has been totally focused on is making sure we get as many people vaccinated, particularly people who don't have access to health care usually, who don't have ordinary.
The Tuskegee Airmen thing is just amazing. He just confused the Tuskegee Airmen with the syphilis experiment, but also just hearing him say the word Latinx, like Biden's like the least woke guy in the universe, but like he has to like cosplay as like a woke guy, a little bit. It's just, I mean, that video just like summed up so many Bidenisms that I thought it was important to play it.
It kind of reminded me when during the campaign, as a way to appeal to young people, clearly someone in his team said to him, just say things like, I see you, I hear you. And so he would repeat that in like every video that he did. That was his strategy for...
Right. In addition to telling young people who are worried about drowning in student debt to like get over it and give me a break, right?
Yeah. I see you, I just don't care.
Yeah, totally.